Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Apparently webinar by Grander Together. Tonight, we are going to discuss the topic on supporting families through adult children's separation or divorce. We know that this topic may not be relevant to too many people, but I believe all of us may have a friend, a family friend, or an acquaintance who may be experiencing such challenging or difficult times, and it would be useful for all of us to come alongside to support any member of that family if we can. Tonight, we are joined by a panel of 3 speakers. In this Apparently webinar, our speakers actually come from Care Corner, Bethel Chambers, and a private individual whom I will introduce soon. So in this series of panel discussions, we want to ensure that we bring professional and personal perspectives to help strengthen intergenerational families. So our panel of speakers tonight, in alphabetical order, we have Chong Yue-En, who is a proud father of a boy and a girl, and he's a practicing lawyer in family law. And he comes from Bethel Chambers, and I believe he will be able to add some very good value to us in the room. We also have Patricia Lam, who is specializing in counseling for couple and families, and she comes to us from Care Corner. We have a private individual, Mr. Ma Ka-ho, and I'm so grateful that Mr. Ma has agreed to come on this webinar to share with us his experience of a divorce situation. I'll let Mr. Ma talk about his situation soon. So tonight, we are going to first kick off with Patricia, followed by Yue-En, and followed by Ka-ho. Patricia, over to you. Oh, just one note as well. If the audience has any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box so that I can collate the questions and pose them to our panelists after they have spoken. Thank you. So Patricia, Care Corner, over to you.
Thank you, Shanton. All right. Hope everyone could see the slides.
Yes, let me stop share. Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Patricia Lam. Okay, I'll invite everyone this evening to imagine being a grandparent, watching your adult child's marriage falling apart, and you love everyone involved, but you're not sure how to protect your family or even yourself. Now, tonight, I want to talk about supporting grandparents through their children's divorce and how we as a community and as individuals can better support these grandparents as they support their adult children and grandchildren. Now, in our work, we often focus on divorcing parents and their children, but divorce affects the whole family, and that includes grandparents. Back in 2020, our team ran a small pilot survey on grandparent caregivers. What we learned, and both from research and experience, is that grandparents are often quietly supporting their families behind the scenes. They are the unsung heroes, sometimes the gatekeepers, and whether their involvement is always helpful or not, they play an important role in holding families together. Now, especially during stressful and uncertain times. Okay, now, what roles do grandparents play at your home? Now, when both parents are working, grandparents often step up in to help with childcare. Now, this care may come from the maternal side or paternal side, or sometimes even both. And through that regular contact, strong bonds and emotional attachments naturally form. And our survey found that about 40% of children, especially in their first 3 years, are cared for by grandparents. Let's take a closer look at the caregiving tasks or roles that grandparents often take on, sometimes right from the moment their grandchildren are born or start preschool. So at preschool age, grandparents are usually very hands-on, caring for children day to day. They help with bathing, feeding, school drop-offs and pickups and even discipline. They also support early learning and help keep the household running smoothly. As children grow and enter into primary school age, the role shifts. Grandparents provide guidance and encouragement, helping to build independence, reinforce good habits, and support learning. They become mentors, imparting values and life skills. By the teen years, grandchildren need less direct care, but grandparents often stay involved emotionally. They may worry about peer pressure, discipline, or school performance, and continue offering stability and support through these transitions. Now, I wonder how many grandparents among us can relate to this. Now, when divorce occurs in a family, its effects really ripple far beyond the couple involved. Let's look at divorce through the eyes of grandparents. Grandparents often begin with joy, celebrating their child's marriage and welcoming grandchildren into their lives. However, when their marriage breaks down, the emotional impact can be deep and complex. They may experience sadness, confusion, or even a sense of loss as family relationships and routines change. Now, some grandparents may try to support reconciliation, focusing on grandchildren's well-being. Others may support, the divorce, especially in cases of abuse, mistreatment, or infidelity. In either situation, grandparents must adjust from cherishing happy memories to protecting their grandchildren and helping to create a safe, stable environment during the divorce process. Now, this role can be challenging as it often involves balancing added responsibilities, attending to the grandchildren's emotional needs, and navigating conflicts between their adult children and former sons or daughters-in-law. Now, on this slide, you will see some of the thoughts and feelings that grandparents shared with us. These are real voices, real experiences of what it's like to navigate family life during and after a divorce. From our interviews, we found that grandparents often go through 5 main emotions: grief, fear, guilt, anger, and divorce, and divided loyalty. Now, let's start with grief. Now, many grandparents feel a deep sense of loss, losing connection with a former son or daughter-in-law or with their grandchildren, especially when access becomes limited after divorce. Now, next is fear. There's often anxiety about losing touch with grandchildren and uncertainty about what the future will look like. And there's guilt. Some start to question themselves, wondering if they could have done more to prevent the divorce, or if something they said or did make things worse. Anger also appears toward former in-law, son or daughter-in-law, toward the situation, or simply out of frustration and helplessness. And finally, many feel divided loyalty, torn between supporting their own child and caring for their former daughter or son-in-law or grandchildren. Now, all these emotions can have real effects on sleep, appetite, and overall well-being. Many grandparents worry constantly about their children and grandchildren. Some feel lonely and start to withdraw from social or community life, asking themselves, what did I do wrong? Why is this happening to my family? It's a quiet kind of pain that often goes unseen, but it's very real, and it reminds us how deeply family changes can ripple through every generation. Now, to the grandparents, your role during and after a divorce can be both meaningful and challenging. Here are a few kinds of a few key ways to navigate this time effectively. Now, first, focus on your grandchildren's well-being. Keep their care at the heart of everything you do. Every decision, every conversation, you ask yourself, is this helping my grandchildren feel safe and loved? Now, second, try not to take sides. It's natural to want to protect your own child, but staying neutral helps everyone in the long run. You may not know the full story, and even if you do, it's more helpful to remain a calm, steady presence for your grandchildren. Third, maintain a respectful relationship with your former son or daughter-in-law. I know that it can be very difficult, especially if you feel your child was treated unfairly. But remember, speaking badly about them or preventing your grandchildren from seeing the other parent can cause more tension and pain. By focusing on the grandchildren, staying neutral, and keeping relationships respectful, grandparents can make a real difference. You can help bring stability, comfort, and love to your grandchildren when they need it most. Now, having said that, grandparents often put their family first, but taking care of yourself is just as important. Let's look at the 3 simple areas of self-care that can help you stay strong and balanced during this time. Now, first, care for your mind and emotions. Acknowledge your feelings, talk to someone you trust, and spend time with people who lift you up. Now, taking care of your emotional well-being helps you stay calm and steady for your family. Now, next, remember to care for your body. Now, stay active, get enough rest, and eat well. Even small steps like a daily walk or a healthy meal can make a big difference in how you feel. And finally, don't forget your spiritual health. Make time for quiet reflection, prayer, or meditation. Now, whatever brings you peace, feed your spirit with hope and positivity through reading or time in nature. Now, when you care for your mind, body, and spirit, you are not only caring for yourself, you are also staying strong for the people who matter most to you. Now, why are grandparents playing such a major role? Because they are helping to raise the next generation. There's a Chinese saying, 家有一老，如有一宝. Having an elder in the family is like holding a treasure. Elders are treasures because they bring wisdom, experience, and guidance that enrich the whole family. Today's grandparents aren't just helping and with caregiving. They support their grandchildren's learning, impart values and life skills, and offer emotional stability, especially during and after a divorce. When adult children are busy working, grandparents often step in, not only providing care, but also physical, emotional, and even financial support. Now, to all the grandparent caregivers here, you may remember those precious moments with your grandchildren, times filled with love, teaching, and inspiration. You play a unique and invaluable role in shaping the next generation. Through your love and support, your adult children are empowered to work, rebuild, and truly thrive. Now, how can we support grandparents as a community and as individuals? Now, look out for grandparents around us, like your neighbors, friends, colleagues, or their parents who are grandparents. Now, encourage them to seek professional support when needed. Now, also be their listening ears and provide them with emotional support. Direct them to the resources available. Now, here we have this booklet called Going Separate Ways. It aims to take a deeper look at the impact of divorce on grandparents and their grandchildren. Now, through this book, we hope to first guide grandparents through their children's divorce journey. Secondly, enable grandparents to relate better to their grandchildren through the painful process. Now, thirdly, It provides some typical practical tips to help grandparents along this journey. Now, before I end, to all grandparents, whether you see your grandchildren every day or just sometimes, your love, wisdom, and support truly make a difference. Even from afar, your presence matters. Take care of yourself, stay strong, and remember, you're not alone, and your role is priceless. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. That was indeed inspiring and spoken out of experience with working with so many families that are going through such challenging times. I really appreciate your tip at the end, where what we really want for families is to teach, to inspire, and to love the next generation so that things will be more positive for everyone. So thanks very much, Patricia. We're now going to move on to Yue-En. Yue-En is our family lawyer, and Yue-En is actually dialing in from Guangzhou Airport. He's working really very hard, but tonight he's very excited to share with everyone. In fact, some of the questions have already been placed in the Q&A. Questions around care and control, about access, even questions around what if the grandparents themselves are divorced, how would they arrange for access to their grandchildren. So I'll now pass it to Yue-En to supply us with all the interesting information from the legal perspective. Over to you, Yue-En.
Thank you, Shenton. So my name is Yue-En. Just before I start, I would like to wave to my parents who are in the crowd tonight, who I have to once again express my great thanks, because the reason why I can travel, my wife can travel, is because of the great support my parents give for childcaring my two kids, even at the very last minute. So I can really see the very importance of grandparents. But as a family lawyer, I have so many clients and so many clients' parents who go through a lot of pain when it comes to divorce itself. And the answers I'm going to give tonight is basically based on Singapore law. And some of the answers might be disappointing to some of you here. So I'm going to just frame it first that you might have some disappointment. But let's discuss to see what's the best we can do in relation to what we have for our law here. The second thing I would like to say is that it's very important for support networks to be done. So if you don't have grandparents available, you can even have godparents look after the kids. So I like to thank my son's two godparents for looking after my kid. One of them who just spoken to you. So that's Patricia and her husband Greg. So without further ado, I'd like to go on to this there's a little bit of me and what I do. So okay, so I think the first thing is, these are four areas I want to quickly cover. The first is, what does Singapore law allows grandparents in relation to divorce? Second, what are some of the cases that I've gone through? And then we're going to talk about this thing called wardship jurisdiction. And finally, this thing about testamentary guardianship. So I guess the first question in divorce is, can a grandparent apply for custody, care, and control? So for those of you who may not really be very familiar, is that when a divorce happens, then a child would have to reside with either the father or the mother. So the father or mother who has the child residing with them has the care and control of the child. And the other parent who doesn't have the child residing with them has what we call access. Custody is about making big decisions for them. So imagine this scenario. So the child was always staying with the mother, father, and the paternal grandparents all in the same home. The paternal grandparents were always looking after the child. The child is 3 years old, and then the father and the mother has an argument. The mother and father, and after that, the mother takes the 3-year-old child and shifts out of the house. And suddenly, not only did the father lose the child and experiencing the emotions of that, but the grandparents were very active in caring for the child, now can't even see their grandchild anymore because of this dispute between their daughter-in-law and their son. So under the Women's Charter, unfortunately, it is only pertaining to the parents, the parents involved. There is no separate law in Singapore to protect grandparents' rights or the rights for grandparents to have a relationship. So for those of you who are asking this question, and if you've been very, very affected by the loss of relationship between yourself and the grandchild, then the only way is see your MPs, your members of parliament, your politicians, get to campaign and advocate with them that there should be a law introduced that allows a balancing, or the law amended to allow grandparents, because what we are focusing on here is the quality of the relationship, and the relationship that is lost in the best interest of the child. It may be in the best interest of the child that the child have constant access to the grandparents, especially in cases where perhaps the parent themselves may be special needs, it may be low IQ. So the grandparents are the ones who are taking a very active role in caregiving. Or perhaps in the case that maybe in this situation here, one of the parents is incarcerated, is in jail. Then once again, the grandparents are the ones who are caregiving here. But we don't have any law for this right now. So as is with the question that was asked, if your son or daughter has access to a child, which means the child doesn't stay with your son or daughter, then the time where, of course, you can see the child is when your son has access to a child, because your son then can determine who gets to see his child during this period of time. But if your son refuses you to even let you see your own grandchildren, then again, there's no recourse you can bring against your own son. So that's why in this case here, there is a big lacuna means a big lobang, a big hole here in relation to the law pertaining to grandparents' rights. Okay, so in this case here, I just wanted to bring up here is that even the law itself is very much not in favor of grandparenting's rights. And there's this case I just put up here where at paragraph 32, they won't even make powers, there's something called inherent powers, which means the court in the justice of the case could use its right powers. It says that even if a grandmother disagrees with the parenting style of a daughter-in-law, she must establish her basis for invoking the court's jurisdiction to grant the power. So it's a very, very difficult thing. Because for the court to grant powers for the grandmother to actually see the child, it's not as impossible. It's just extremely hard. Okay, and this is under a separate set of law. It's not woman charter divorce law. This is actually called wardship jurisdiction. I'll get in there a bit. So below here, so in what situations can a grandparent actually invoke wardship jurisdiction? The threshold is called unfitness. So in a case, if you apply this 2018 case to this other case above, right, you have to show that the daughter-in-law is unfit. But how easy to show that you're unfit? It's not easy. Perhaps the daughter-in-law is taking drugs, perhaps even is in prison, separated from the child. Maybe that you could show a case of unfitness. But it's a much higher threshold than best interest, because if the daughter-in-law is a relatively okay mother, the grandparents are good caregivers as well. In a best interest test, you're balancing both against each other. But in this case here, for wardship jurisdiction, you must prove unfitness. And that is the difficulty right now, even in the cases. So in this case of TSF versus TSD, I'm taking this from a different angle. So let's say, for example, now that we're established, it's so hard for the grandparents to even get orders from the court to allow them to have access to their grandkids or even have custody, care and control their kids. Then what can they do? In this particular case, the grandparents were found to be almost like de facto parents, because there were times when the son wasn't there. So because of the very close relationship between the grandparent and the grandchild, this was part of the consideration the court did when they ruled that the care and control of the son was to be given to the father. So of course, with the father having care and control, the paternal grandparents, who were the de facto parents, of course continued to care for the son. But you can see in this case here, that it's actually quite, this good relationships and everything else, I mean, for the best interest of the child, it should really reflect what it is in reality. And in reality, it's that the grandparents are playing such a big role in looking after the grandkid or the grandkids, that this should be factors raised in considering whether this support structure and network is in the best interest of the child, and hence it should go to either the mother or the father. But in the cases where the maternal grandparents and the paternal grandparents are equally good, then the court has to make a difficult decision to where the child is going to reside. They can't control. But then in this particular case here, UOW and UOX, right? It's one of those very rare cases where this thing got grandparents for their birthday access. Interestingly, in this case, the court ordered access to grandparents for their birthdays. So it would seem that for special occasions, and not regular access, like weekly access, that is. So I mean, there was a question coming about, how about overseas, access, I think overseas access itself would probably be very tied together with whether your own son or daughter has access and what are the terms of access. So for example, in a consent order, when parties agree, I think there is some flexibility to discuss things like, okay, maybe on the June holidays or school holidays, the grandparents can take the child overseas for holiday. We can write that in and say, oh, is there no objections to that? So a consent order is normally achieved when parties sit down and discuss the issues. Your daughter and your son-in-law, your son and your daughter-in-law may be on bad terms, but not that they can't sit down together for mediation and try to work out an arrangement that takes in all the other people who have an emotional attachment to the child in consideration as well. Okay, so there's wardship jurisdiction and succeeded in the court. Unfortunately, 0 cases have succeeded for wardship jurisdiction. So I'm just going to quickly run through this case. Now, this case which I did, that we were trying to be the first case in Singapore that succeeded in wardship jurisdiction. In this case, there were drugs involved and there was neglect involved. However, in the end, in this case wasn't decided by a judge because it was a very happy ending, a very touching ending because my client, who was the grandmother, found that her own daughter turned over a new leaf and became an excellent mother. So she felt there was no need for her to go in to become the guardian of the child. But even in wardship jurisdiction, it's not an easy threshold. We had to talk about things like drugs, and dangers to the child. So the court even considered asking for what I call a custody evaluation report. So finally, I want to just quickly bring this into these 2 points here. The first point here is then, when can the grandparents actually come in to then be guardians, to have care and control and custody of kids? Unfortunately, it's a very, very strange situation, but your own child must be dead. And I mean, this is a terrible thing to say. Like, who wants your own child to die, right? I mean, you gave birth to your own child. But if your child passes away and your child names you as a testamentary guardian in the will, it means that you can come in as a grandparent to co-parent together with the former spouse. Either a former spouse or even present spouse you can still co-parent together with. But let's talk about divorce situation, the former spouse. So as a testamentary guardian to come in, but a will needs to be done to clearly state that your child wants you to be his representative or her representative if he or she passed away. So what happens, for example, if, for example, there is mental incapacity, your son or your daughter had a stroke, got a car accident, and is in a coma or in a vegetative state. Even in that situation, the grandparents can't come in to look after the child. In fact, if the children are divorced, it may very well so that the care and control of the child may go from the daughter over to the son, who used to have access. So, I mean, these are just certain situations there that you have to consider. Now, one more interesting thing is that if, for example, the children has special needs and now they're above 21 or like 18, 19 years old, technically speaking, the grandparents can apply to be what they call the deputies of the grandkids with special needs. Although the law clearly says that the preferable person would be the parents or the guardian. So these are just some of the other ways that you can come involved to get what I call custody, care, and control of the children. Having to take more questions right now. If you would like to fill a feedback form to give me some ideas of how you like this presentation, please scan the QR code and let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Yue-En. Wow, indeed, that was very enlightening. From you, I've learned about care and control. I've learned about access. I've learned about wardship and unfitness, an interesting phrase. And you've also shared with us about testamentary guardianship. But also, thanks for also touching on special needs children, where deputyship could come into the picture. I'm sure the audience will have many more questions, but we'll save that until after we've had Kaho to speak to us about his very interesting experience having gone through a family with a separation. So Kaho, if I might just hand over the stage to you. Thanks, Kaho.
Thanks, Shanton. This evening, my role here today is to support the first 2 speakers in the topics as discussed, but I'll be providing some feedback from the standpoint of my own personal experiences with my family. To move things along, I have prepared what we call a mind map. I hope that everyone can take and see. I will not cover items of topics that have been covered before by the first two speakers, but I will at least try to summarize them in a few seconds or so. Okay, I think the topic tonight is fairly important for all of us. Enough to say that in the context of Singapore, we have for every 3 marriages that was registered last year, one couple, one ex-marriage, you might want to call it, have filed for divorce or annulments. So it's 1 in 3 as of in 2024. Now, this ratio is increasing, as you can see here, and where it ends is anybody's guess. But I'm sure that Shenton must have already known this. So because the fallout of this of such a trend would have severe impact on our society, as well as the way we want to live our lives, our culture. But first off, as for myself, I'm 72 years old. I have 7 grandchildren, married for 46 years to the same woman I married, when I was way back in 79. Of my 3 boys, they're still with me. When I say with me, meaning that they are on their own. They're living off, and they're looking after my grandchildren in so doing. But let me just itemize, give you some highlight as to what I've seen in my 72 years of life. I have 8 siblings in my family, of which you can say that 20% of them have experienced incidents of divorce, 2 out of 8. Insofar as my sons are concerned, 1 of them have experienced that. So you could say that the 20% has increased to 30% down 1 cohort. And if I were to count my daughter-in-laws as well, family, having experienced the same thing, that incidence has increased to 50%. So I'm not saying that I'm an expert in divorce, right? Far from it. I'm just saying that this is something that we have to understand and deal with it, because it's going to be a fact of life. Divorce, as mentioned earlier, has multi-generational impact on all. Now, insofar as I call my children the 2G, I'm 1G, so that makes them 2G. As far as they're concerned, being ex-husband and ex-wife, these 2 protagonists, it's a choice. It's a choice that they have made. And they're adults, they wouldn't know how to deal with it. However, downline, the trauma of such a divorce, if they have children, is well researched, and you can ask Patricia about it. Insofar as I call them the 3G, right? These are the victims of divorces. For the boys, depending on the guardianship, these are the things that can happen. For the daughters, similarly. Now, research has shown, again, I'm sure Patricia will be able to support this, depending on, I call them the victim, the age of the victims, they would manifest certain characteristics or behaviors. And what can the grandparents do? Let's look over here. As highlighted by the second speaker, there are resources, institutional as well as legal resources, within the Singapore framework to assist. But more to tonight's topic, more to my relevance in this whole thing, is that as a relative of such an incident, as grandparents, we have certain avenues of that we can consider, certain paths that we can take. to assist in the scheme of things. The words I provided here, I think the most important one is, apart from being the emotional bomb shelter for the kids, a refuge. A refuge, in more ways than one. Yes, we have provided refuge for our family, but also for third parties as well. And not just third party kids, the 10-year-old, but third party adults who have been chased around the house. I won't say anymore, but yes, to provide a refuge, unconditional refuge for these victims. It's very, very important. And such support has to be intentional, very consistent, very sustained. And I'll go into a bit more detail about what we have done. But is there a school for grandparenting? You know, a course that we can take, Skills Future, something like that? I doubt it. All right, support from grandparents can come from either side, the paternal or the maternal side of the family. And how such support is delivered depends on who they are, what they believe in, their economic station in life, and so on. But in my case, what's more important is our mindset. How do we approach these situations if we know it is inevitable that we will face these things? Because God willing, we may be, if we are not already grandparents, we will be grandparents one day. And when faced with such situations, how do we mitigate such things? The influence would be very much core values, and core values of grandparents are influenced by tradition, culture to a large extent. I have nieces and nephews in Australia who have been chased out of their house at 18 years old or have to pay rent to their parents once they're past 18. Okay, so that's their culture, that's their norm. Insofar as we are concerned, our core values is very much faith-based, and all our children are in the same faith, and we believe in we have the same core values. So that helps, that really, really helps. So what we do has to be consistent with what we believe in. So my advice here, or our advice is, when you have a family, even before disaster takes place, you have to establish a relationship with the in-laws, the incoming person to the family. That's very, very important, right? And we do have grandchildren from the partnership. It's very, very important to even establish a relationship with the child until when? There is no end game here. Our promise to all our grandchildren is that, well, give an example. I was asking one of my grandchild the other day, say, because what we have are boys, so they call us Ye Ye and my wife Nai Nai in Chinese. And I asked them, no, what's the lead behind whenever you see Ye Ye and Nai Nai and we relate and then we leave? And she can recite, or she can finish off she can say what we've been telling her ever since she was a child, is that, you know, Ye Ye, Nai Nai, you can be angry with me. You can be upset with me. You can praise me. You can compliment me. You whatever. But Yong Yong Yen Yen mean it forever and ever. Ye Ye, Nai Nai, you guys will continue to love us to the end, and that's very important. Okay. The other example is, grandparents need to know about new tech. My grandchildren can find me and my wife on Apple, Find My, anywhere, anytime. Wherever we are, Japan, Europe, America, they'll know how to find us. They'll know how to call us. So you could say that we are the recourse of the last resort. So yes, tonight's discussion is about consequences and recourse if we face such incidents. But my suggestion here is, even before you face these things, make sure you have all these, you've covered all the angles, all the eventualities, such that the victims of such an incident, the consequence is either mitigated or resolved altogether. So last question here is, when is it over? And I always tell them, it ain't over until it's over. Okay, so my grandchildren, they all know that as long as we are around, we will be available. And this information is then sent back up the line to my in-laws and to my kids that okay, you know, just take it easy. We have the bases covered. Do what you have to do. Don't get into any conflict such that bad things can happen.
Thank you, Kaho. So that was a very structured narration of what's been happening in your family. Thank you very much. My biggest takeaway from you is that as grandparents, we can be a refuge, either for the victims or even for the adult children who are going through such difficult times. And I also get from you that building relationships with the in-laws and the grandchildren very early on, before any tragedy strikes, is of paramount importance if we were to move forward with what Patricia mentioned, to teach, to inspire, and to love. We're going to take questions now. Perhaps I could go on this first question for Patricia. There was someone who asked, what if it was the grandparents who caused the divorce? I was wondering, Patricia, would you have encountered such a situation where it was like 1G, as Kaho says, 1G, who created a lot of conflict and then it impacted everyone? And what happened and what could we do? Patricia, perhaps you could unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay, to start off with, I think we need to acknowledge that the decision to divorce is actually to be made jointly by the couple. So there are many reasons to why there's a marital breakdown. We often group it into like hard issues and soft issues. So the hard issues will be like the 3 A's, right? Affairs, abuse, and addiction. And the soft issues can be anything under sun. So probably we have come across cases where there are marital issues pertaining to challenges with the in-laws that sometimes that come in the way or interfere, that may lead to some lead to marital issues, challenges that may, unfortunately for some marriages, that lead to divorce. But having said that, the problem is never like the cause. Even when we have cases where there are challenges of that, but it is still how the couple manages their marital issues and navigate around and seek help. So there's no direct answer as to like, is the marriage directly being caused by grandparents? Having said that, two scenarios that I have in mind. One is that if grandparents you find that or recognize that maybe I'm causing some challenges for the couple, then with the awareness, then or even being concerned, right, wanting to help the couple, then maybe take a step back and invite the couple to seek marital counselling, even if there's ambivalent in whether to either the couple wanting in or out, but it's always good to seek professional help to help them to gain clarity. Now, same thing whether it's the couple have decided to go on the to divorce, it is still for grandparents not to take side, because it is still the decision of the couple. And that would help to reduce the challenges that the couple face or the conflictual relationship that may arise from unhelpful support. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Patricia. So it looks like a heavy responsibility is placed on the marrying or the divorcing couple and not so much on their parents. But interestingly, for every grandchild with a mum and a dad, there are two pairs of grandparents, the paternal and the maternal. Perhaps I could pose this next question to Yue-En. There was something about, do grandparents only get access to their grandchildren when their adult children, either the mother or the father, is given access, let's say for weekends or weekdays? What can grandparents do if they want more access to the grandchildren?
Well, unfortunately, the starting point is the grandparents do not have any right to bring an application to the court to ask for more access. I wish there was, but there isn't any right now. So what I suggest in a case like this is what we call outlaw, it's out of the law. There are things like mediation, where perhaps if that the grandparents themselves can reach out to the former daughter-in-law or the mother or the children to see whether they can invite. So here's a little trick lah. If the grandparents are suggesting to pay for things for the grandchildren, but will say that, you know what, let me bring the grandchildren to these enrichment classes, it may be a not legal way, but a way to actually try to see what sort of olive branches can you extend to your former daughter-in-law in order to try to show that you're very interested in the care of the children as well too, and that you really love the kids. I believe that sincerity and persistence will be there. Sometimes for my case, I hear my clients say, I have no issues with my husband's parents. In fact, I really like them. They do a great job caring. So can we put it in order that, well, I get care and control. I still have the right to ask my husband's parents to continue to caregive for the child. So people have actually asked me before to put that in the court orders. So to make it very clear that, look, my issue is with your son, but not with you guys. And I still want you to be very much involved in your life. So I think very early mediation, very early discussions, and even if the divorce is over, it's always possible to start conversations again. And I believe starting conversations so that if it's something that the daughter-in-law will find useful, I'm sure that she'll be willing to talk as well. I mean, the former daughter-in-law.
Thanks, Yue-En. So therefore, there would be such a thing as the consent order that is still possible from the legal perspective. I'm also thinking now on an informal basis, and perhaps this question I can pose to Ka Ho, who opines that your relationships should be built right from the start with the in-laws, with the grandchildren. I was wondering, Ka Ho, if you could share with us some practical tips of how you would, I mean, since you have more than one child who's married, what sort of things did you do to start building relationships with the in-laws of all your children, or even with your grandchildren?
Well, that's actually a very unfair question. Let me explain. In my slide, I mentioned that we are all faith-based. We're all of the same faith. So everything that we do has to be referenceable to our faith. It's not my wife's village, my village, her tradition, my culture. No, it has to be from the same book and from the same chapter, from the same verse. So to answer this question directly, I use the metaphor. I see my children as boats, and we are safe harbors. Once the boats have left the safe harbor, we bid them Godspeed and best wishes. The harbor can fall apart. So what? So from a faith-based standpoint, you can say that, well, true, it is referenceable. To use a word that might clue you into my faith is they have left and they have cleaved together. And all we can do is just wait for them to ask for help. That's all. If something happens to grandpa and grandma, one of us leave this earth, or we divorce, or whatever uneventful situation, eventful situation, then the boat has left harbor. So they are on their own chapter, their own voyage, their own journey, and we wish them well. And they all understand that. They are all on the same page as us.
Thank you, Kang Ho. Perhaps Patricia could also follow up on that scenario where how have you encountered situations where you see that the maternal parents and the paternal parents of the divorced couple are on good terms with each other, and how do they go about supporting their children who may be in conflict, but the in-laws are fine with each other? Have you encountered such a situation?
Yes, we do. When both maternal and paternal grandparents, right, are still very much involved in the caregiving. However, because of the hurt and pain that stem from the marital experience, right, with each other, the couple may experience the hurt and pain and the emotional struggle, having to work with each other. So in such situations, both sides of the grandparents continue to support the grandchildren during the respective access arrangement, the period, while the parents, get support from the through counseling. And of course, through counseling, it is really to provide emotional support to the individual parent, as well as support them through helping them to redefine their relationship from marital relationship to parental relationship, to build on, work with them on co-parenting and as well as communication, really having children at the center.
Okay. Thank you. I would just have one last question. Perhaps I can pose this to Yue-En, and it's around what would be the legal age beyond which a child in Singapore is considered no longer under the custody rule? And I recall you mentioned that it might be different for persons with special needs, children with special needs, who are under a different category called deputyship. Could you share with us what's a legal perspective of age beyond which certain things don't apply?
So in Singapore, the age of majority is 21. So once a child turns 21, they can choose who they want to live with. They can say bye to both parents and say, I'll live with my grandparents. That's also possible. But in case of special needs, because even at 21, the child is in the same cognitive condition as they were the day before. So, but because of the law, at 21, it treats a special needs kid as a grown-up and an adult. So that is where the Mental Capacity Act kicks in, and where a deputy can be appointed to be the one to make decisions on behalf of this adult child with special needs. But as I said earlier, if this condition is permanent and doesn't change, even a child is like 17, 18, 19, 20, and someone can really apply to be a deputy to allow the continuity of care and making of decisions.
Thanks, Yue-En. There's another interesting question that came up. I promise this will really be the last one. Perhaps I can pose this to Patricia. And the question is about what advice would you give to grandparents who feel powerless? They're stuck between wanting to help their families, but they don't want to overstep. How would they manage this balance, Patricia?
I think first of all, grandparents need to sort of reflect on how are they coping. Is it the grandparents, are they getting support themselves? And because if grandparents were able to take care of themselves and emotionally or and physically, then grandparents can step up to sort of be more able to give the help that is needed for the grandchildren. Now, in some situation, if I'm reading it correctly, will be stuck between wanting to help and not wanting to overstep, right? Then it will be very much how, for grandparents, the role is really to love grandchildren. Maybe the advice is really to leave the parenting role to the parents, just stay true to what our grandparents could do. Just enjoy your grandchildren, the time with them, in whatever forms, you know. Yeah, maybe in that way, I mean, trusting that when the grandparents support the grandchildren, they are also allowing their children, you know, adult children, to step up in the discipline or care for their own children.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And with that, I'd like to summarize with what Patricia shared with us earlier, that what we all can do for our families is to teach, to inspire, and to love. I think that's a really wonderful ethos to go by. Thank you very much, Patricia, Yue-En, and Kaho for joining us tonight. In closing this webinar, I'd like to announce a few items. Number one, Grander Together is going to officially launch on the 29th of November at Bidadari CC. Everyone is invited. Please join us. Admission is free, but registration is required. Now, what we will do there'll be many booths, photo booths, there'll be snacks, and what's most important to us is for us to announce all the kinds of programs that Grander Together has in store for members of the public, and we're very excited to do that on the 29th. For the participants in this webinar, I hope you won't mind if I send you all an email for you to register for this and to consider joining us for this really fun day. Also to announce that if you'd like to remain in contact with us, everyone in this room, we appreciate if you could scan this QR code and you'll be brought to a page where you can choose whether you want to connect with Grander Together on WhatsApp, on our website, or on our Telegram channel or our YouTube. And in the month of December, we will pause and take a break from apparently webinars. But in January, when we come back, we are organizing a webinar to talk about restorative practices. How do we speak life and speak restoratively in conflicted relationships? And in February, we're going to discuss how we can support or live with persons with dementia in our families. So I hope you will continue to connect with Grander Together. And it leaves me great pleasure to once again thank our panelists, Patricia, Yue-En, and Kaho. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good night.